Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
2 years ago, the city of Gillette had over 800 homes for sale. Today that number's down to 300. School enrollment's up, and the energy industry's hiring. How did Gillette persevere? In a two-part Wyoming Chronicle, we'll visit with Campbell County leaders to see what the future holds for the city that calls itself the energy capital of the nation. Gillette, next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for Wyoming Chronicle is provided in part by the Dragicevich Foundation, supporting the work of the Wyoming State Parks.
And as we begin our second week in looking at the economy in Gillette and in northeast Wyoming, we're going to take a look at an oil production company. We're going to see how youth were impacted by the economic downturn and now the recovery here in Gillette. And finally, we'll visit with Gillette's mayor a little bit later in the program. But it's a pleasure for us to be at Cyclone Drilling with Josiah Moerkerke, who is a drilling process engineer, or drilling performance engineer, here at the company. Josiah, welcome to Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you.
Of course, oil and gas was deeply impacted by the downturn in early 2016. Oil prices were below $30 a barrel. Give us a sense as we begin our discussion today, how that impacted the company and the region.
Okay, it was survival mode especially for the company, but also for the region. You know, that's like one of the lifebloods of the region, and for us, that is what we do. So when oil got that low, a lot of the operators stopped drilling, and so we were looking everywhere for wells to drill for people. We only had one rig running at the time up in the Bakken, and we had just laid off the last 2 rigs before that. So
your workforce went from what down to what?
In 2014, we had 27 rigs running, down to 1 rig in 2016.
And how many people is that?
Each rig has about 24 to 26 employees on it.
Huge impact then.
Yeah, huge impact.
So what was the company, were there times that this may not work out for us, or was it literally just a waiting game?
A little bit of both. For employees of the company, it was, hey, how long can we last here? How long is my job needed here at this price, at this amount of drilling? But then there's also a waiting game because there's opportunities in that, because we're not the only company being affected by the price, and so there's opportunities to buy equipment or get services for discounted prices during them.
So now oil's approaching $70 a barrel. Some say the price point might be $76 a barrel. What should we look at when we're looking at oil prices, and what truly has that meant now for the company?
When looking at the oil prices, we're going to look for sustainability, for a price that can be kept, that won't spark a bunch of new production, new drilling, that'll drive the supply up again. And that's what we had in 2014, 2015. For the company, that it's given us a large increase in demand. We have 10 rigs running right now and a couple more on the way. And so that's tenfold from 2016.
Your colleagues have described to me your short-term your short-term future as being apprehensively excited, What does that mean?
That means that we are excited for the future and we're preparing for it, but it's also in the back of our mind that, hey, something could stop this from happening. Something could stop this recovery, or.
So from your perspective, literally your business could double or it could half in the next year. Mm-hmm. So give us your best guess. It's a crystal ball for sure, but what is the general feeling?
I think we are cautiously optimistic about the next year. There's a lot of things going on worldwide that could help spur the price of oil up even more than it is right now. But again, we don't want to see it going to 2014 price levels.
So is U.S. demand for oil holding steady? Is it actually rising a little bit?
It's rising a little bit, but even for the next 5 years, I think that the forecast is right around the 20 million barrels a day. Right around there.
So it's flattening out, perhaps a little bit. This industry has changed in the amount of time it takes to get oil quickly to the customer. Give us an example of the technologies that you use and you look at every day that allows that to happen quickly, and times that were a month or longer are now days.
Yeah, so for example, in 2005, it took 35 days to drill a well up in the Bakken. Now we're averaging about 12 days. So that's a huge decrease there. Most of that comes from increase in efficiencies with the tools that we use, also with managing and watching the performance of all of our guys on the rig, managing and watching how fast they make connections or do different processes on the rig. So that's really helped us decrease that time needed.
You work with a workforce that's really nomadic. Has it been an issue you lost so many workers in your workforce 2 years ago to now get workers back? How does that process work?
It really hasn't been an issue. We're lucky that a lot of our former employees wanted to come back and work for us, and our veterans or seasoned hands, we were able to keep them working through the downturn. And so we have really good management at all of our locations or all of our rigs. And from there, it was just a matter of calling and getting the guys that used to work for us back.
There's so much, it seems to me, that is beyond your control. And really back in the days, it was an OPEC-controlled world. Is that still the case today? Are there other geopolitical forces that really drive and impact the price of oil now?
I would say OPEC is still a large factor in the price of oil, but then Russia actually produces more than Saudi Arabia now. They're the world leader and producer. But they have a pact with OPEC, Russia does right now, and so they're, I think, actually just recently in this week are talking about what they're going to do as far as production cuts, if they're going to extend those or cut those back. And so I think that is the biggest factor for price of oil.
Where is U.S. oil in the world picture? Certainly production for U.S. oil must be way up due to technologies, et cetera, that we've talked about. The U.S. now is more of a major player in the world economy of oil. Is that accurate?
That is. Last year we produced 9.3 million barrels a day. This year we're on track to produce 10.7 million barrels a day, and then it's forecasted for 2019 that we'll be at 11.4 million barrels a day. So a huge increase. And this year we'll break the record for the most we've ever produced in a year.
Cyclone Drilling provides rigs to essentially customers in the western United States. Where are your markets?
Our markets are the Bakken, the Powder River Basin here in Wyoming, a little bit in the DJ Basin in Colorado, and then the San Juan down in New Mexico.
Is this an ultra-competitive business that you're in? Is it kind of regionally dominated by a few players, or are there many players competing for the ssame customers?
I would say it's pretty competitive. There's a friendliness to it, but then there's also the competitive side to it that if another drilling contractor gets that work, then that's work that we lost out on. And there's regional players, but then there's also nationwide players that we have to compete with. But we're fortunate that in this region we are the best. We can provide the best performance and equipment.
Still a good career choice for young folks that are thinking about oil and gas. You made the choice recently to become a petroleum engineer. Is that still a wise career choice in your view?
Yeah, it is. There's always going to be a need for or demand for petroleum or natural gas. And if there's a chart that actually predicted that in 2014 to 2015 would be the peak petroleum engineering graduates, because it's a cyclical chart, just like the price of oil. Sure. And so I think we'll see less graduating petroleum engineers, but there's still definitely a need, and it's a good field to go into still.
Josiah Moerkerke with Cyclone Drilling, it's been a pleasure for us to visit with you, and congratulations for your service to the Gillette community, and best wishes, I think, for your future. It looks bright.
Thank you.
We're going to continue on now in our tour of Gillette. We're going to go to the YES House, and YES stands for Youth Emergency Services. How did the economic downturn in the area impact youth? Sometimes that slips our thoughts. and we're going to take a look at that next. And as we continue our discussion on Gillette's economy here on Wyoming Chronicle, we're at the Yes House with Clark Fairbanks and Sheri England. Sheri, you're the executive director of the Yes House, and Clark, you're the assistant director.
Correct.
Yes stands for Youth Emergency Services.
Correct.
And sometimes I think when we try to understand statistics or impact of economies, youth maybe aren't the first thing we think about. So Sheri, let me start with you. The services that you provide to youth, how would you say your services were related to the economic downturn that's occurred here in Northeast Wyoming?
Well, when there's a downturn or there's some sort of stress in a family, the children also feel that. And sometimes that creates more difficulties within that family. There are problems that surface that maybe weren't there before. And then sometimes kids will act out because their behaviors are their communication that something isn't right.
And this is a 24/7 facility. You offer residential services, you offer services to kids before and after school. Let's understand a little bit the array of services that are available here. Go ahead.
I think the first place to start is just looking at our mission. So the Yes House's mission is empowering children and families to achieve lifelong success. And that really encompasses the Yes House's purpose, which is to come alongside children and families in our belief system that none of us do it alone. Families need help. Our children need help. And so in those services, we provide them, as you mentioned, from residential treatment, serving children with mental health, substance abuse, co-occurring disorders, through early intervention, day programs, education programs, to prevention, parenting classes, STEM programs at our local elementary schools. And so we really try to provide a continuum of services for children and families in need.
You have many partners that you work with. Give me an overview of some of the partnerships that are important to the Yes House.
Well, we do work with Department of Family Services, Department of Health, but locally we work with almost all our nonprofits. Either we volunteer for them or they come in and volunteer for us. And also our businesses too, because we have youth that will work at like maybe at Burger King or McDonald's or someplace.
You were impacted by the downturn in the economy because some of your funding is related directly to how successful Gillette is. Tell me about that relationship as far as funding is concerned.
Go ahead.
I think one of the impacts was at a state level. The state cutting back on its funding for children and families from Department of Family Services, reducing prevention services, Department of Health reducing grants for substance abuse services in our community, and that was related to the economy, related to the downturn in the state's economy. We were also impacted at a community level. Much of our funding from the city and the county comes from 1% sales tax and that optional 1%. And as that went down, our funding went down at a local level. I think one of the things that was remarkable that speaks to our community, though, was in that first year when much of our funding was cut, our individual donations and business donations went up.
That's surprising.
They saw the need. And it speaks to that partnership, I think, with the Yes House and the value that the community sees in supporting our children and families.
Yeah, I would agree.
The Yes House has a long history here in Gillette. Sheri, how long has really the concept been important here in Northeast Wyoming?
Since about 1976. That's when it first started. There were a grassroots effort with a bunch of individuals that noticed that there were kids that didn't have a home, didn't have a place to be, and they needed a place. So they raised some money and got a house and house parents, and that was our first crisis shelter group home.
Sheri, you were commenting that even before the economy really fell here in Gillette, that you were impacted really by what became an economy that was falling.
Yes, we were hearing rumors, and we also saw with our funding that it was being decreased here and there, state funding and local funding as well. And then some individuals, or not individuals, but people that work in the industry, I think were feeling it and had opportunities to move out of Gillette, I think, before things got worse, and so they took those opportunities, which impacted us because...
Your staff, right?
Yeah, it
Right.
did, because some staff left because of that.
Many think that children are resilient, yet tell me, what did you sense of the impact of Gillette's economy on children, either emotionally, mentally, even physically? What went on here with kids?
I think we all felt when you don't know what's going to happen, that's scary. And then when you hear your mom or dad talk about there's not going to be enough funding or enough money to do this or that, it affects the kids. Kids sense things, they know things even without being told. I think when there are hard times within that family, it creates or it shows what problems there might be in that family, and it makes matters worse. And so kids have a tendency to act out. Their behaviors will demonstrate that there's something wrong in that family, and that's how they communicate. They don't have the words and emotions to talk about that.
Clark, how do you know that the work you do here is good? How do you know that how you're supporting kids is really effective?
Yeah, you know, there's a number of ways, and I think that's the hopeful message in working with kids and families for us, because their stories sometimes are very difficult. But you know, we track our outcomes because we want to know that we're having that positive impact. So we look at things like remaining free of substances, that they're living in recovery. But then it's also, we ask our kids and we ask our families. They give us feedback on how they're doing, on the quality of the services. We have a youth advisory council. They met tonight. Sheri meets with our kids, who some of them are current residents, some are past, that come back to give us feedback. And I think as an agency, we continue to try to respond to the needs that children have, families express that they need, but also our community. And that's how the Yes House has continued to evolve. We still provide the crisis shelter that we did, those services that started in 1976, but we provide much more than that today, because the community has asked for that.
I assume you always want to do more, but are you meeting the need? Or even with a facility like this is a 4-building campus that we're on. It's a wonderful facility here. Do you have the resources that you need here in Campbell County?
I would like to say no.
What more would you like to do?
Well, there's kids that, and I call them kids, and that might be disrespectful. There are youth that need services that there's no funding or no way to help them get the services they need. And that...
Give me an example of the type of services that you're thinking about. Well,
we have residential treatment and sometimes day treatment, and it costs quite a bit for therapists and psychologists, nurses, and we employ all those people.
Over 100 employees here, by the way.
Yes, yeah, 110, 120, depends on the day.
Yeah, because as much as we'd like to say that children and families won't need our services, I think the reality is we know that there is some consistency to that families and children are going to continue to struggle and need our services. So,
It's a surprising campus. Is there anything else like this in Wyoming that's as broad and maybe as important to the community serving its youth as Yes House is here in Gillette?
I think there are other agencies that come close, but I think we have the most array in our services that range from prevention to treatment.
Well, it's an impressive service that you provide. Unfortunate that it's necessary, but truly what you do here is remarkable, and especially the impact that it's had, I think, in times of a challenging economy is worth noting, and that's why we're here today. So Sheri England and Clark Fairbanks, thank you so much for joining us today on Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As we wrap up our conversation about the economy in Northeast Wyoming, it's our pleasure to be joined by Gillette's Mayor, Mayor Louise Carter-King, the first female mayor of Gillette.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, welcome to Wyoming Chronicle. It's a pleasure for us to visit with you. You've served in Gillette City Council since the early 1990s before becoming mayor in 2014.
I have.
You've been in Gillette a long time.
I have, since 1975.
Wow, okay, so you understand clearly what Gillette's been through relative to its economy.
Absolutely.
Take us back from your perspective a couple of years ago when really the bottom was falling out and the future wasn't certain.
Well, Gillette has been, over the years, through a lot of booms and busts that just goes with the energy economy that we live in. But 2 years ago, it just hit us really hard. It was like a perfect storm as far as oil got hit, gas got hit, and coal got hit, which of course is our three main resources that we have here. And it was just a really dark year, but the darkest day was in March of 2016 when the coal mines here laid off almost 500 workers. And the trickle-down effect, or just, it was just very disheartening. It was just a very tough time for our community.
So then, but you still had to look forward.
Yes.
How are you doing that?
Well, it was tough. You know, we had to, just with the city alone, we had to cut $60 million out of our budget in 1 year. And that sounds so daunting, because it is. And when people say, well, what'd you cut? The simple answer is everything. We cut people, we cut services, we cut everything you can imagine, because we had to survive. But the good news is, with our staff, we have a great staff here at the city, and with our community, we all kind of rallied around each other, and we made it through. Some people would say, well, we lost 15% of our workforce. Well, what we needed to focus on is we kept 85% of our workforce, and so we just moved on as best as we could.
So here we are in 2018.
Yes.
Just a little 2 years later. Things are looking better. You're in the middle of a budget planning cycle now.
Yes.
You've had budget meetings recently here in Gillette City Hall, and it's a beautiful city hall, by the way.
Thank you.
You're talking about capital construction again.
We are. We are looking at things that we haven't looked at for 2 years, because we just couldn't. So when we would look at a budget in the last 2 years, we would go down the line and there would just be zeros. Like, the staff wasn't even asking for anything because they knew there was no money for it. And those were tough times, but again, we're tough people here in Wyoming, and we did okay. And so last night we had a budget hearing, and it was so nice to go, like on city beautification, which has been zero. We now have allocated money for that sort of thing, and things that we pride ourselves in, and making our community more beautiful and great to live in.
Mayor, does it concern you a little bit? You look at your sales tax revenues, and retail now outpaces mining, at least as we speak today. Is that concerning to you as you look towards the future?
Well, it has been. Now we still feel that will come back, and our sales tax has been slowly climbing. And so I would call the mining industry and the energy industry at this point pretty stable. Oil, as the rest of the state knows, is picking up a little faster than coal, but coal is at least stable. And stable is a great word for us now, because it's not dropping, and we can start budgeting and forecasting a little easier because we are seeing, a track going up. So we are still cautious. In fact, I think, our administrator said we are cautiously optimistic. And that's way better than it was 2 years ago.
We've heard that term a lot.
I bet you have.
In the last 2 days, but it's better than certainly the opposite.
Absolutely.
Mara, our viewers right now are looking on their screens at the beautiful Gillette Recreation Center. How important have those amenities been in the downturn to support the positive feelings in the community?
They have helped so much. It is so nice. A lot of our citizens here work on shift work, and it's nice when they, have days off. They have a place to go to, like the rec center here, or our mini parks, or somewhere to take their families, and for little cost, and still enjoy, our amenities around town. So I feel that all is just helps with the spirit of our community. We have a beautiful college. Our Pronghorn Center is, second to none. And, we have wonderful things here in Gillette for our families to do.
Madam Mayor, you're well familiar with the governor's Endow initiative to diversify Wyoming's economy. What does diversification mean in your eyes with such an energy emphasis here in Northeast Wyoming?
Yes, I think it would be difficult for us being the energy capital of the nation to ever completely diversify away from energy.
And is that smart to get away from the boom and bust cycles that you've experienced?
It would be wonderful to get away from it and just have boom, all the time. But with the way that the energy has been going over the years, that's hard to get away from. But with the ITC Center, the Integrated Test Center, and an international company such as J. Cole, Kawasaki coming over here, that is what they're looking for, is using our resources in a different way to make different products, not just for power or energy. So I feel that is our future. It may be 20, 30 years down the road before it really builds up into an industry, but just with the X Prize alone, other places that the X Prize has gone to has spurred $1 billion economy around that. So I'm hopeful that will happen here too.
Well, Mayor, thank you so much for joining us on Wyoming Chronicle today. And if I were to ask you, is Gillette back? What would your response be?
Absolutely. We never went away.